Rome didn't fall in a single night. It collapsed slowly, from the inside. Imagine a city shrouded in smoke, its once mighty walls breached, soldiers, their faces etched with despair, retreat in disarray, while citizens scatter in sheer panic. This isn't just the story of a battle loss. This is the story of how the greatest empire the world had ever known destroyed itself, long before the first enemy soldier ever stormed its gates. For over 2 centuries, the Roman Empire basked in an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana. It was a golden age, a time when Roman roads connected the known world. Its aqueducts carried life-giving water across vast distances, and its legions stood as an unassailable symbol of power. From the sun-scorched sands of Syria to the misty shores of Britain, one law and one authority prevailed. The empire seemed invincible, eternal. But this outward strength concealed a creeping fragility. While emperors like Trajan and Hadrian expanded the empire to its greatest extent and adorned its cities with magnificent monuments, the very foundations of the state were beginning to erode. Complacency settled in like a slow-acting poison. The ruling class, insulated by immense wealth, indulged in unimaginable luxury, often detached from the growing problems of the state. The signs of decay were there for those willing to see them. The empire had become too vast, its borders too long and expensive to defend. To fund its massive army and bureaucracy, the government began to debase its currency, sparking inflation that would slowly eat away at the economy. And perhaps, most dangerously, the military's role shifted from defending the state to choosing its rulers, making political stability dependent on the loyalty of the legions. The stronger and more imposing Rome appeared on the outside, the more hollow and brittle it was becoming on the inside. The Golden Age was merely a beautiful mask hiding the cracks that would soon shatter the entire edifice. The stability of the Pax Romana died with the philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius in 180 AD. What followed was a century of chaos, a vicious cycle of ambition, betrayal, and murder that poisoned the very heart of Roman politics. The throne of the emperor was no longer a sacred office earned through merit or noble succession. It became a prize to be seized by the most ruthless and powerful general. Emperors were assassinated with shocking frequency, their reigns often lasting only months or even weeks before they were replaced by the next usurper. In one infamous year, the year of the 5 emperors, the empire was torn apart by competing claimants, each backed by their own loyal legions. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers meant to protect the emperor, transformed into the ultimate kingmakers. They held the fate of the empire in their hands, once going so far as to auction off the imperial title to the highest bidder. This constant turmoil paralyzed the government. Long-term planning became impossible when leaders were focused solely on their own survival. A nation cannot stand firm when its leaders are treated like disposable merchandise, constantly replaced by a whirlwind of ambition and betrayal. The political corruption rotted the core of the state, leaving it rudderless and vulnerable in an increasingly dangerous world. While the political system descended into chaos, the economic engine of the empire was sputtering and dying. The constant warfare and the bloated bureaucracy demanded ever-increasing amounts of revenue, leading to crushing taxation that fell heaviest on the small farmers and the working poor. Many were forced to abandon their land, fleeing to the cities to become part of a jobless, restless mob, or becoming tenant farmers, trapped in a cycle of debt. To meet its expenses, the government resorted to a disastrous policy of currency devaluation. The denarius, once a coin of nearly pure silver, was systematically debased until it contained only a fraction of its original precious metal. This led to runaway inflation, destroying savings and making trade unpredictable. The gap between the fabulously wealthy elite and the impoverished masses widened into an unbridgeable chasm. The rich owned vast estates, or latifundia, worked by armies of slaves, while the majority of citizens struggled for survival, This heavy reliance on slave labor also stunted technological and social innovation. With an endless supply of cheap manual labor, there was little incentive to develop more efficient methods of farming or production. Rome was rotting economically from the inside out, its foundations being eaten away by inequality, inflation, and a lack of innovation, long before the barbarian hordes crossed its borders. As the political and economic crises deepened, the very soul of Roman society began to decay. The civic pride and sense of duty that had built the empire evaporated. Citizens who once viewed military service as the highest honor now actively avoided it, sometimes even mutilating themselves to escape conscription. The responsibilities of citizenship were replaced by a culture of apathy and distraction. The government, in a desperate attempt to keep the restless urban population docile, placated them with the infamous policy of bread and circuses, free grain and spectacular, bloody games in the Colosseum. Public life became a spectacle of entertainment rather than a forum for civic engagement. People were more interested in the fate of their favorite gladiator or chariot team than in the policies that were shaping their world. This was accompanied by what many contemporary writers saw as a steep moral decline. The traditional Roman virtues of discipline, austerity, and duty, the gravitas that had defined their ancestors, were replaced by a pursuit of luxury, pleasure, and personal gain. The social fabric that held the empire together was unraveling. When a society loses its values and its people lose their sense of shared purpose, its army will inevitably lose its strength, and its government will lose its authority. With its political, economic, and social foundations crumbling, the military might that had once been Rome's greatest asset became its most critical vulnerability. The empire's borders were overstretched, spanning thousands of miles from the cold forests of Germany to the deserts of Mesopotamia. Defending this vast frontier against increasing pressure from migratory tribes became an impossible task. Generations of conflict had also educated its enemies. Barbarian tribes, such as the Goths and the Vandals, had learned Roman military tactics and organization, sometimes by serving in the Roman army itself. The most significant shift, however, was in the composition of the legions. Unable to recruit enough Roman citizens, the emperors began to rely heavily on foreign mercenaries, many of whom were from the very barbarian tribes they were supposed to be fighting. These soldiers often had little loyalty to Rome as an ideal. They fought for pay and for their commanders. Entire legions were now composed of non-Romans, led by non-Roman generals. The critical turning point had been reached. Rome was no longer protecting its own borders. It was hiring outsiders, its future enemies, to do it for them. The shield of the empire had become a double-edged sword, just as likely to turn against it as to defend it. The final, symbolic blow came in the year 10 AD. For the first time in 800 years, the eternal city of Rome was breached by a foreign enemy, Alaric, king of the Visigoths. A tribe that had once served as Roman allies, marched his army through the Salarian Gate and into the heart of the empire. For 3 days, his men sacked the city. The event sent a shockwave across the civilized world. This was not just a military defeat, it was a psychological cataclysm. The city that had conquered the world, the city believed to be protected by the gods, was now at the mercy of a barbarian chief. Temples were looted, palaces were burned, and the wealthy nobles who had lived in decadent splendor fled for their lives. Holy relics were stolen from the churches. The sack of Rome was the definitive moment when the illusion of Roman invincibility was shattered forever. For people across the empire, it was the ultimate proof that the center could no longer hold. Rome was no longer the center of the world. It was just another city, vulnerable and broken. In the aftermath of the sack, the Western Roman Empire swiftly disintegrated. The central authority in Rome collapsed, and the vast territory splintered into a collection of smaller, competing kingdoms. Ruled by barbarian chiefs, the Vandals conquered North Africa. The Visigoths controlled Spain. The Franks moved into Gaul, and the Anglo-Saxons invaded Britain. while the Eastern Roman Empire, later known as the Byzantine Empire, would survive and even flourish for another 1,000 years. The empire, as the world had known it, the single, unified power that stretched across the entire Mediterranean, was gone. Europe entered a period often referred to as the Dark Ages, an era of fragmentation, declining literacy, and economic regression. The fall of Rome marked the end of an age, but its legacy endured. It became the ultimate cautionary tale, a timeless lesson in the profound danger of internal decay. The ruins of its forums and colosseums stood as silent monuments to an empire that had reached the heavens, only to crumble from within. Empires are rarely murdered by outside forces. They more often die by suicide. The story of Rome is a stark and enduring warning for all civilizations, a reminder that military strength and economic prosperity are meaningless without political stability, social cohesion, and a shared sense of purpose. The barbarians did not topple a mighty empire. They merely pushed over a hollowed-out structure that was already rotten to its core. Rome did not die when the gates were broken. It died the moment its people stopped believing in Rome. It makes you wonder, could the same fate befall any of the great superpowers of our modern world?